So for the first stitch along video on the blanket stitch, we're going to the basics of the blanket stitch. And as the name says, it's used for hemming blankets and also for hemming tea towels, handkerchiefs, whatever you can think of. And that's what we're first going to do. On the left side of the fabric, we're going to fold this over. And if you like, you can just, what I usually just press it a bit with my fingers, and this hemp fabric that I have is easy for that. But you could also, if you like, put in a few pins. And here you have your basis for starting with the blanket stitch. I'm going to take a length of thread, and my thread is pearl cotton number 8, but you can do the blanket stitch with really any kind of embroidery thread. Threading my needle. I have a sharp pointed needle, and I'm starting with a little knot in my thread. In another one of these stitch along videos, I'll show you how you can start in another way, but it's perfectly all right to start this with a knot, and I do that by wrapping the tail of the thread a couple of times, 3-4 times around the needle, and I pinch it with my left hand and then pull the needle through the wrapped thread. And I get a knot at the end of my thread. I think it's called a quilter's knot. Now I'm going to insert my needle into this fold. I'm going to the inside of the fold. I'm coming out at the top of the fold. And when I pull on the thread, the tail with the knot will disappear into the fold. I'll unpin, this pin was a little bit close to where I'm working. Put it down a bit further here. And I'm ready to make the first stitch. And the first stitch is not a blanket stitch, but it looks like it, but it's not. It's just a starting stitch. I'm going to go down through both layers here. My needle goes to the left and I wrap the thread behind the needle. And now I pull the thread through. Like this. And I've made the first stitch and the thread is firmly attached. And now I'm going to make the first proper blanket stitch. I'm going down, my blanket stitches, the classic blanket stitch, to be rather square. So I imagine a square here with these 2 points and here these 2 points, and I'm going down here. And again, my needle is pointing to the left. I wrap my thread behind the needle and pull the needle and thread through. And this is my first blanket stitch. And I'm going to make another one, so going down about here, through both layers, thread behind the needle and pulling the needle through. Let's do this a couple of more times. Going down with the needle through both layers of the folded over edge, thread behind the needle and pulling the needle through. To be honest, I think I'm going to take these pins out because my thread keeps catching behind the needles. And I think that now that I've made this start, it will be okay. So, as I said, a couple of more blanket stitches like this. And perhaps they're not perfectly square, but that's okay. I don't mind all that much. You could, if you would like to make them perfectly square, do something with pencil, making points for where you exactly should go down, but I don't feel that's necessary. Going down, thread behind the needle and pulling the needle through. And when you pull on the thread, you need a certain kind of tension. For instance, if I don't pull hard at all and make the tension very loose, you would get something like this. You see here, you get a loop and the stitches look way too loose. So you have to pull harder until the thread is nice and smooth. But on the other hand, you can't pull too hard, because suppose I pull really hard, you can see what happens. The fabric starts to get to fold a bit here, and you also might get a rather large hole here. So undo that a little bit. So in the beginning, it might be that you need to get a feel for the tension of the thread. And take your time to do the stitches. You can purposefully do the thread behind the needle, but when it's hanging down like this, it's also mostly it's enough to keep your fingers behind the thread, and you see that the needle is above the thread. And as you can see, you get an edge with the thread running down the left side of this edge, and that gives a very sturdy edge that will protect, well, it did protect blankets and tea towels, etc., as I said, from fraying and from getting damaged. Now this is the classic blanket stitch and its basic use as a hemming stitch for all kinds of textiles.